Continuing with our fall series, here's how to doodle pumpkins with watercolor. First, think of the colors that you want your pumpkins to be. They don't necessarily have to be orange, but I'm going to start off with orange. For your typical pumpkin, I'm starting with just a regular sort of egg shape as the main sort of section of the pumpkin. And then I'm just going to draw some half moon circles or some C shapes around it, some thick C shapes, and then I'm going to connect them to the bottom. I'm leaving the white of the paper sort of in slivers between each of these sections, just so you can see the form and shape of the pumpkin a bit better. I'm also just adding a little bit of a bump at the bottom of each of the sections of the pumpkin, just so you can see the very bottom defined a little bit more, and so it looks more like that pumpkin shape. And now with watercolor, it's important to start off with your lightest shades first and then slowly build them up. It's very easy to go darker with watercolor, but it is harder to go lighter. So that's why we start off with our lightest shades first and then get darker. So with this next pumpkin, I'm going to show you how to draw it in a slightly different shape. So I'm starting with that main section as more of a circle, and then I'm using my C's, that C shape, just to follow and become a little more elongated as you get towards the outside of the pumpkin, and that way it will create like this sort of squished pumpkin look. I'm still leaving those white spaces in between each of the pumpkin sections, but I'm making sure that those curves are a lot more stretched. Rather than stretched upwards, they're stretched further out towards each side. And then as my layers dry, I can go back in and add darker layers on top, and that way they won't bleed into each other and become diluted. Now, I find that what's been super trendy over the past couple of years has been these colorful pumpkins or even white pumpkins. And you can create those by using blue. To make my blue lighter, I'm just adding more water to it. And with that light wash, I'm creating just the outline of each of the sections of my pumpkin. To show you another variety of pumpkin, I'm making this one a little bit taller. So my egg and C shapes are a little bit taller, like height-wise, rather than wide like our previous pumpkin. And once I have that light blue outline, I'm just taking some water and I'm going around those lines just beside it, so that way that blue will fade into the white of the background paper and it will give the illusion that the pumpkin is white. Because as with many white things in life, they are not just completely white, they always have shadows to them, and those shadows often have a color. And for this last pumpkin, I'm showing you a completely different way of doing it. I'm just creating a nice soft purple and I'm filling in the circle entirely and waiting for that to dry. With watercolor, whenever we don't want colors to mix, we have to wait for the color that we put on first to dry. If the paint is still wet, any new paint that you put on top of it will just bleed together, which is great when you want to mix the colors or to have that variety of color or shades in your pumpkin, but it's not so great if you want to have the stem not bleed into the rest of your colors. So that's why we're waiting for this first layer to dry before we go in with the stem. So going back to this first pumpkin, I'm filling in a cute little stem here. And now this is where you can get super creative with your stems. They can be curly cues, they can be really long, they can be really short. It's totally up to you. Have so much fun with creating these stems of the pumpkin. And I can also go in and create those super dark spots of my pumpkin as well, now that the first layer is dry. This is where I could also add some spots to my pumpkin if I wanted to, or I could keep them pretty clean looking. This is totally up to you. This is where you can totally get creative and make these pumpkins your own. So I'm showing you several ways to create the stems of the pumpkins. You can see the variety of curlicues that I've made. They go around and about each other, or they're just a simple sort of like S shape, or your simple swirl shape. Yeah, just to give you a variety of different options that you could do for yours. And then when I create my darkest shadows for my pumpkins, I concentrate them more towards the bottom of the pumpkin because I'm just assuming that the light is coming from up above the pumpkins. So I'm leaving those pretty light. And I'm adding just a little bit of blue, that same blue but in a darker wash, to the bottom of our white pumpkin. And you can see that the pumpkin still looks pretty white even though we've used some blue. And for our final pumpkin, I've waited for that layer to dry completely, and then I'm just going to draw with a fine tip pen, and I'm going to draw out each of the sections of the pumpkin, and I'm going to draw out its little stem as well. And you can also use your pen to draw any little imperfections that you want your pumpkin to have, or any extra ridges that you want it to have. You can use it to fill in the stem or whatever you like. If you like this video, give it a like, comment what you want to see next, and subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks for watching!